The second Marcos administration may have a hard time living down the first week of October. On October 1, President Marcos watched the Formula One race in Singapore on an unannounced, controversial, belatedly justified visit. On October 4, three controversial presidential appointees, Executive Secretary Vic Rodriguez, Press Secretary Trixie Angeles, Commission on Audit Chair Jose Calida, were confirmed to have resigned or been removed from the cabinet. On the same day, the new Executive Secretary, former Chief Justice Lucas Bersamin, gave his first and controversial press briefing. Looming over the week, the assassination in Metro Manila on October 3 of the influential radio commentator and Marcos and Duterte critic, Percy Lapid. What is happening with the Marcos administration? I addressed Bersamin's scandalous statements in my latest column. Tonight, we focus on the killing of Percy Lapid and the purge in the palace. Good evening. I'm John Nery, and you are in the public square. On Monday night, Percy Mabasa, better known to his hundreds of thousands of followers as Percy Lapid, was ambushed just outside the residential village where he lived. He was the second journalist or media personality to be killed under the Marcos Jr. administration after Ray Blanco, and the first in Metro Manila in years. How do we make sense of all this? We are joined tonight by the journalist Roy Mabasa, Percy Lapid's own brother, and by journalist Raymund Villanueva, safety officer of the National Union of Journalists in the Philippines. Good evening, Roy, and sincerest condolences on your brother's untimely passing.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Raymond. I'm glad to be here also. Yeah.
We join other journalists in pledging solidarity with you and your family. And good evening, Raymond. Thank you both for joining us in the public square.
Yes, good evening, John and Roy. Pare, taos-pusong pakikiramay.
Raymond, I think there might be something with your camera. It's black. There you go. All right, thank you. All right.
Yes, John. Magandang gabi. At parang Roy, pakikiramay uli.
Thank you, Raymond.
Roy, if I could start with you, where were you when you heard the news?
I was actually attending the German National Day because as a journalist, I cover the diplomatic beat. So I normally attend diplomatic functions. And on that very night, I was with some government officials who were attending also there, interviewing some of them. And I received a phone call from one of my pamangkin, yung panganay na anak ni Percy. And yun nga, I was told that he was gunned down. So I immediately rushed to Las Piñas. But unfortunately, pagdating ko ron, wala na yung body and it was already brought to the nearby funeraria.
Roy, did you or your family expect something like this? I mean, we know the risks, but was it something that you were expecting?
No, knowing Percy, because Percy has been in this business for the last 3.5 decades. So knowing his style, medyo natatakot din ako, kasi hard-hitting talaga si Percy and relentless. I mean, uncompromising, always telling the truth. Yan si Percy. Kaya madalas kinakabahan din ako. In fact, when he started his career in 1984 or 1983, I joined him. But eventually, bumitaw ako dahil alam mo nung mga time na yun, martial law pa noon eh. So natatakot din ako sa style niya. I mean, parang bibilis yung buhay ko pag ganun, pagkasama ko si Percy palagi sa araw-araw. But it's just a fun. But Percy Lapid is Percy Lapid. Talagang hard-hitting, straight shooter, and truth teller. Yan si Percy.
Raymond, why is it that journalist killings in Metro Manila are rare? I think the last one was in 2016, and really just a handful.
Yes, totoo 'yun. Majority of those who are victims of media killings are either in Bicol region or in Mindanao.
Mhm.
Yung buo ng Mindanao. And it's quite rare comparatively speaking na sa Metro Manila ito ginawa. You're right. It's been years since the last journalist killed in Metro Manila happened.
Why is it that way, Raymond?
We're closer to corridors of power.
Mhm.
Siguro medyo nag-iingat yung those who seek to silence truth tellers na wag namang gawin malapit sa Manila because the attention, as in the case of Percy, would be
Mhm.
intense immediately. Yung mga perpetrators ng media killings would think that if it happens in the regions, it's either mas mababa ang attention na makukuha
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
madaling mag-die down yung issue. That's why the NUJP has put up media safety offices and it has launched campaigns
Mhm.
to stop media killings para maging consistent yung panawagan for the Dastarde Acts to stop and for the campaigns for justice for the victims would be more sustained.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the killing of Percy Lapid even more shocking. You know, not only that I mean, he had hundreds of thousands of followers. No, this is a major media personality, and he's been at it for decades. No, may track record talaga. No, but it also happened actually just right outside his subdivision. No, I mean, parang
Kahapon,
killers are sending an extra message. Parang they can
yes,
reach
John.
there. Oh.
If I may share yung usap-usapan namin kagabi doon sa
Mhm.
indignation rally sa Boy
Mhm.
Scout Monument sa Quezon City last night, organized by the NUJP. Uh, the journalists who attended made the observation that doon sa area where the incident happened, maraming security guards because the area is
Mhm.
full of private residential subdivisions.
That's right.
Uh, why no one seems to have noticed yung kasi parang inabangan talaga eh.
Yeah.
Oo, parang the gunmen were able to kill Percy with no hitches, with no problems at all. Isang question 'yon ng mga kapwa natin mga mahayag kagabi. It's supposed
Yeah.
to be a safe place because upper middle class 'yan eh.
That's right.
Why it happened? Sana the police would be able to get CCTV footages katulad ng sinabi ni Colonel Jaime Santos.
Mhm.
At sana it would reveal more information leading to um, the identification of the perpetrators.
That's right. Yeah. Roy, again, our apologies, no, if we talk about your brother's death in this way. Uh, Roy, did did he was he ex- did he receive death threats after his death?
Um, Sorry,
Uh,
Jan, medyo naputol yung question mo. Can
Sorry.
you please repeat
Did,
the last part? Yeah.
yeah. Did he receive death threats? In your view, who do you think may be behind this?
Um, if you will review all yung mga video ni Percy, yung mga commentaries niya on yung mga daily commentaries niya, um, mabibilang mo naman sa kamay mo, sa dalawang kamay mo, yung mga dinidiscuss niyang issues. I mean,
Okay.
he's discussing Malacañang, he's
Mhm.
discussing the Marcoses, the Dutertes, yung mga ganon, yung mga cabinet secretaries before and right now present.
Mhm.
So, madali para sa akin pag sinumatotal mo yan, more or less magkakaroon ka ng idea sino dito yun yung most affected para sa akin. But
Mhm.
I do not want to second guess because I would like the police investigation to go first, to go ahead, And then siguro, kung magkakaroon ng problema, we will have our second option also. Pag yung sinabi ni Raymond kanina, yung tungkol dun sa subdivision, ano? If I may just add na the family has surrendered already to the PNP yung dashcam ni Percy because yung sasakyan niya parehong may dashcam yun, front and back. So, isinurrender yun sa police for examination sa krame together with his cell phone. I still have to hear from the PNP siguro within today if they find out anything na alam nilang suspicious. But from plain view, kasi nung sinurrender namin yun, we got copies of some of the footages dun sa dashcam. We noticed already some suspicious movements there at saka yung suspicious vehicles, circumstances that could lead authorities or probers para ma-identify nila unang-una kung sino yung mga tao dun sa surroundings.
Yeah.
May mababanaag kang mga muka, may nakita kaming plaka, but I will leave this to the police investigators kasi like what I said, I do not want to preempt what they're doing.
The New York Times obituary on your brother mentioned, among other things, that it was your brother who broke the story tungkol dun sa sugar imports. I'm sure that's just one of many controversies that he covered or uncovered.
Oo. Alam mo, nasabi mo yan dyan, even I'm a journalist also, nagtataka ko kay Percy kung saan siya kumukuha ng information niya. Yung sources niya masyadong malalalim.
Malalim nga.
Masyadong malalim. Palibasa siguro, I just realized na for some time, nung walang trabaho si Percy, nag-put up yan ng maliit na newspaper just to be able to survive yung pamilya niya, no? Nagtayo siya ng maliit na newspaper at marami siyang naging story ron about Bureau of Customs. So I could only surmise na yung some of his information ay probably nanggagaling sa mga kakilala niya, insiders sa Bureau of Customs. Kasi marami rin akong kaibigan nagtatanong saan kinukuha ni Percy yung informasyon niya. But sobrang galing, sobrang accurate, sobrang sabi ko I cannot tell you because I do not know where he is, who the people he is talking to, sabi ko.
Yeah, that comes from decades of legwork, ano? Raymond, why is the Philippines so vulnerable to journalist killings?
Reigning ang reigning ang culture of impunity, ang atmosphere of impunity dito sa Pilipinas. It's not just journalists who are
I'm sorry, we just lost
of and rights defenders as well. Kung mga judges nga walang pakundangan kung i-threaten and harass, what more other ordinary rights defenders and truth tellers, ordinary journalists like us, kayang-kaya. And why killings persist is that because yun nga, impunity, wala namang masyadong napapanagot. Merong pa isa-isa na nako-convict, but that does not, one or two convictions would not deter enemies of freedom of expression and press freedom. Ilan? 90% get away with it. Since 1986, there have been 197. Si Percy na ang 197th victim of media killings. How many convictions since 1986 against those accused? Wala naman eh. That's why akala ng marami na kung hindi nila mapatahimik ang isang truth teller, mabuti na lang patayin. I hope Percy's case would be different. Sana ma-identify kung sino ang may kagagawan nito, but if you go by averages, it's an uphill battle eh.
But Raymond, how can Percy's family get justice? if you look at the few successful cases, we brought to a just conclusion. What were the common factors? Are you talking of sustained media attention? Are you talking of international, I don't know, goodwill or something? I mean, like, yung Maguindanao massacre, no? Natuloy lahat na umabot dun sa conviction stage. Only because it was such a sensational crime.
One, yung ginagawa na ni Roy to cooperate with official investigative agencies. But hindi lang dapat PNP yan, kung makakahingi ng tulong sa NBI at iba pa. And then pangalawa, I would enjoin Roy's family, Percy's family to support activities and campaigns to call for justice, not just for Percy, but for other victims of media killings. Sumama doon sa kampanya kasi tama ka, John, hindi lang police ang makakatulong sa pag-solve nitong insidenteng ito. Sustained media attention, sustained campaign for justice for victims of extrajudicial killings. In fact, mamayang gabi, magsasalita ang representatives ng Philippine government led by Justice Secretary Boying Remulla sa Geneva to probably to tell the rest of the world that the criminal justice system is working in the Philippines. Kami, nagko-cover ng human rights would be there observing, and then the other human rights groups in the Philippines would be there as interveners. We should challenge the Philippine government to do something to prove what they claim to be a working justice system in the Philippines. Kailangan may mapanagot dito sa killings na ito, and that would only happen if there would be a sustained campaign, not just from the Mabasa family, but as journalists. Wag nating bitawan. We were given some sort of victory doon sa Ampatuan Massacre, but that took 10 long years. Kung maiwan lang sa pamilya ng mga naulila yung kampanya na ito at walang media groups, walang human rights groups na umassist sa kanila all the way, baka iba ang nangyari. Even then, hindi lahat ng primary suspects doon sa kaso na yon were convicted, and many, more than 100 ata, are at large pa. Meron pang mga nagtatago, so hindi pa yun complete victory. With all this together, we would have a better chance, and we would have a stronger voice to compel the government to do something about it, to do right by Percy and Ray Blanco.
Thank you. Roy, nabanggit ni Raymund about the role of your family. I was personally moved by your family statement. Ang ganda ng pagkasabi na the killing is not only a crime against Percy and your family, but also against the country and against the truth. I was really personally moved by that. I want to ask, how is the family? Do you have safety measures in place? Are people reaching out for support? And if I may ask, Roy, if people want to pay respects to your brother, is it possible for them to visit the wake?
Yeah, una-una, sagutin ko muna yung last question mo about if the people can visit the wake. Even without asking Percy, kasi knowing Percy as a very sociable person, very approachable, napakabuting tao, matulungin, I'm very sure na papayagan niyang bisitahin siya ng mga listeners niya, yung mga naniniwala sa kanya. Kasi yun ang bumuhay sa kanya eh. Actually, kung titignan mo yung career pattern ni Percy, si Percy nagpalipat-lipat ng istasyon, lilipat sa isang istasyon after 2 months, tatanggalin because of pressure. Can you imagine, in the 35 years ni Percy sa radio, siguro baka 100 beses na tinanggal sa radio yan.
Wow.
Kasi nga because of political pressure. Magkokomentaryo siya ngayon, may magagalit sa kanya, magsusumbong sa may-ari ng istasyon, then tomorrow, wala na siyang programa ulit. So maghahanap na naman siya ng bagong programa. I saw how Percy persevered throughout the years para lang makasurvive bilang isang totoong commentator and journalist. And yung ibang tinanong mo, how the family is coping at this time, napakabigat para sa kanyang pamilya nitong nangyari, lalong-lalo na sa mga anak. Kasi nakita ko how dedicated father si Percy. Alam mo yan, malalaki na yung mga anak niya, may asawa na yung iba, pero si Percy ayaw niyang malayo yung mga anak niya sa kanya. Siya lang yung bukod tangi among us. 7 kasi kami. Pero among us, siya lang yung may ganong klaseng karakter na who hold to the family. Gusto niya magkakasama sila. In fact, every Sunday, nagluluto yan para sa mga anak niya. Can you imagine that? Bukod sa mga ibang ginagawa niya, nagluluto pa siya para, yung paboritong pagkain ng mga anak niya. Kaya nakikita ko yung dalamhati ng the entire family. Hindi, kaya iniiwasan ko minsan pumunta nung nakikita kong masyado silang down, lumalayo na lang muna ako dahil hindi ko rin makaya eh. Alam ko kasi yung relationship ng buong pamilya nila. Very, very closely knitted.
Thank you, Roy. Maybe just one last question. Raymond, how should journalists keep safe? Especially after the killing of Percy Lapid.
Gusto ko na ako personally, maging katulad ni Percy na doon sa kanyang mga paniniwala, what he believed in, what he thought was right, ganun na yung gawin nila. Kasi wala namang distinction between corrupt journalists and upright journalists pagka gustong patayin ng gustong patayin ng mga kalaban. Mabuti na yung katulad ni Ka Percy na kapag mayroong nangyari sa kanila ay yun ay makilala dahil tumindig sa pinaniniwalaan nilang katotohanan at doon sa tama at makakabuti sa sambayanan. Pero that's not answering the question really eh. May mga trainings and workshops na isinasagawa ang media organizations, CCJD, NUJP at iba pa para ma-equip ng skills and awareness ang journalists sa mga safety practices. Kasi maraming kalaban. Pero meron pang ang mga nangyayari na mga media killings, but meron mga ibang kaso katulad nung kina Marcel Espina ng Bacolod na dahil sa training nakaiwas sa kapahamakan. So there are organizations within the media industry that offer free media safety trainings. Umattend sa mga ganon, maging aware and connected dun sa aking first point is practice ethical journalism. Minsan it helps, but in a country where impunity reigns, hindi rin natin talaga masabi. So the media industry, journalists should unite in calling for an end to impunity, to a culture that respects freedom of expression and press freedom and other freedoms and rights that we should enjoy under our constitution. So unity, yun ang sinasabi ng yun ang isa sa mga campaign bywords ng Marcos government. Pero dapat alam natin kung para saan tayo nag-unite.
Thank you, Raymond and Roy. Thank you. I would like to note that your brother's killing also elicited very strong statements of support, from the French, the Dutch, the Canadians, and then now from the European Union. Medyo parang nakaka lakas ng loob. Maybe I'll ask you for some last words, Roy.
Thank you, John. Siguro ang parting words ko lang is that we are overwhelmed with all the support na tinatanggap ni Ka Percy. Hindi na namin kilala itong mga taong ito, John and Raymond, kung saan-saan na nanggagaling. I mean, lahat sila, they have something to say about Ka Percy, no? Ako, brother ko yan, hindi ko na alam kung saan nila nakukuha yung sinasabi nila, alam mo. Many of them have listened to Percy for years, many of them for months, or some of them for days, pero I'm overwhelmed totally. Pati yung pamilya, alam mo, yun lang ang nagpapalakas talaga sa kanila. Pati yung suporta ng NUJP, ng FOCAP, and all other media organizations for that matter. At saka yung mga ganitong forum dyan, I really appreciate this because kagaya ngayon, I could sit here and speak before you. It makes me stronger.
Thank you, Roy. That's all the time we have for our first segment. To Roy Mabasa, thank you for sharing your time and insights, even as you are still in the days of grief. And to Raymund Villanueva, a tireless media safety officer we all rely on, thank you for your work defending the public square. Thank you, gentlemen. There were other presidential appointees who were not reappointed while Congress, and thus the Commission on Appointments, is adjourned. But the three ex-officials mentioned, Rodriguez, Angeles, Calida, were the most controversial. The historian and columnist Manuel L. Quezon III, who served at the highest levels of government during the second Aquino administration, suggests that the purge, if we can call it that, shows that the second Marcos administration does not place as much stock on loyalty as the first one. I'm delighted to say that he joins us tonight. Good evening, Manolo, and thank you for making time to join us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks Manolo. Let me start by asking you, you argue in your column today that in your view, administrations are brought down by their own mistakes. Would the reappointment, would the new appointments fall under the category of mistakes, or would the original appointments be the mistakes?
I think it tells you have to step back and view it this way. Every administration is a coalition, and it's usually an uneasy one. The one at the center is, of course, the president. The president, in turn, is dependent on a few people, and only a few people get to enjoy the president's trust. What happens to those people says a lot about the president. So in this case, what we saw from very early on was that the president went into office with the third highest majority in our history, but without really a party, without really much of a machinery outside of his family, and with the people closest to him in the palace being relative outsiders. Vic Rodriguez, as executive secretary, had, he had city hall experience, but not much more than that. And yet he became what's traditionally called the little president, and seemed to enjoy tremendous, as all executive secretaries do and have to do, enjoyed a lot of trust and confidence from the president, who seemed to be the type to delegate freely. Then what did we see? We saw practically from the start, very soon, that there was a strong campaign to take the executive secretary down. And it came from the allies, from within the coalition. Within the coalition. And it succeeded. It succeeded after about 2.5 months. It succeeded spectacularly. And it was, as these operations go, it was by the book. There were exposés, there were, a long line of friendly columnists shooting, questions every day. Then there was commentary online. And then sooner or later, it became untenable for the executive secretary to to insist that he was actually helping the president and not the problem.
Mhm.
What made it worse was when he flamed out, he tried to do it by clinging on to some sort of power by creating a position for himself of
Mhm.
chief
Right.
of staff. And then they wheeled out Juan Ponce Enrile at the age of 98 to blow that apart. So that was a very public takedown. And what we saw yesterday was basically just the funeral rites for something that had been decided pretty much by the time the president left for the States. And we knew that the executive secretary was out, there was going to be a new one, etc., etc.
We've had factions, as you said, no? All ruling coalitions are precisely that. No, they are coalitions. So we've had factions before in the second Aquino administration. You had Samar and Balay. Under Duterte, you also had several factions, but I don't remember anything as vicious as the first 100 days of Bongbong Marcos. Is that?
I don't know. I think in terms of, there was just much more of it because there has to be more of it because in the past, in the old days, and think of it, 2010 to 2016 is the old days. That's when we were there. That was the last. That was the last of the era when a lot of this was done by columnists starting the conversation going, which would then be echoed on radio and TV and eventually ventilated in Congress. So it's a smaller circle, but the basic tenor is the same, except it's just much more multiplied because, of course, there has to be a social media component now, and that's how it's measured. But I don't think there was any difference between, let's say, the way Malutequia was writing about the executive secretary and the way maybe the late Billy Esposo did, or Conrad de Quiros did, because this is primarily an inter-family fight. I mean, within the coalition, Marcos, and it was the same for Aquino. It was the same for Duterte. Remember, it was columnists close to him who would often start the ball rolling. At the heart of it always is who is going to be able to push the president to do something. And that's where the push and pull happens. There have been many presidents. Aquino was one of them who put a premium on loyalty and felt it had to be reciprocated. I've argued, because people have said as much, that the president now is not even like his father, and not even much like many traditional Filipino politicians, in that he can be very clinical and very unsentimental about his political relationships with people. So in that case, what did this tell us? This is what I found interesting. It took 2.5 months. It succeeded, which means the president's mind can be changed. Once he makes a change of mind, he can be sort of held to it. There's no sort of trying to steer a middle course and make everyone happy. So that says something. However, whether this was willing or unwilling on the president's part, the net effect is I guess what matters. As I said, and you mentioned, I do think presidents can actually, Sergio Osmeña was the one who keyed me in on this. He says, any issue for an administration is like the drip, drip, drip of water, and either it can eventually corrode and cause a hole, or you can immediately seal it up and patch it. Effective presidents seal it up and patch it before it can cause rot and damage. Presidents who aren't able to do that can suffer from their own inability to put a stop to things.
That's why I place the emphasis on controversy. These three officials were very controversial because of their previous work. My question
But controversial to whom, John? That's the thing. in the
Yeah, no, no,
beginning,
controversial
be-
even to the administration, and maybe it had reached a point where they were net negative. My question is, we replace it. For instance, no, the names that have been so okay. Bersamin is in. Toledo is being floated among other names for press secretary. You even have Aquino, Executive Secretary Ochoa, being floated as a possible COA chair. No? Is this are they packing to the center? Like okay, we're gonna get rid of some of these people might already be dead weight because of the reputation they bring to the table. So maybe is that a legitimate way of understanding the situation?
I'm sorry. Can we review because something started playing in the background, John? Can we
Sure.
rewind? And sorry,
Sure.
something
No
started
problem.
playing. I had to. Can you repeat
Yeah.
the question, please?
Yeah, sure. So I place the emphasis on how controversial these three appointees were. Controversial to everyone, even to the president, in terms of they are eating too much oxygen in public discourse. And then I'm looking at the replacement, like Bersamin, former Chief Justice, names being floated like Toledo back as press secretary, maybe even Aquino, executive secretary, Jojo Ochoa as potential COA chair. Are is the president's inner circle trying to pack to the center, like getting rid of the more controversial appointees, and then just look for ones that can work in the middle? Is that a legitimate way?
I think we have to understand first of all that governance in our system is a lot more ad hoc than those of us who analyze things for a living would prefer it to be. A lot of it is done on the fly because it's a very messy sort of rush to govern that happens when an administration comes in, because you have to pay back an enormous number of people, and your coalition is probably much broader and more unwieldy than you would like. And then the story of every administration is who will stay and who will eventually drift away and under what circumstances. What we know is because of the particular governing style or executive style of the president, that he put a big amount of trust and confidence in the person he chose to be executive secretary. And that person, by all accounts, was not shy about using that trust. So we can assume that there would be some members of the cabinet who are there sort of as attached agencies to the executive secretary. My understanding, for example, is that the press secretary was one of those. Others might be more have more independent standing. Let's say the one who ended up Kalida, who was appointed to COA. He has independent standing, not as a loyalist, because my understanding is he was a minor loyalist, but as part of the Duterte old guard. And that is why you would have had to accommodate him and that sort of thing. As some people sink in influence, everyone attached to them sinks as well. And remember, there was sort of a smoking gun here, which is that the executive secretary, the former executive, Vic Rodriguez, said that he was going to be chief of staff. There was an administrative order, and the one who announced that it existed was the press secretary.
Yeah.
By the time that the new executive secretary announces that there is no such thing as administrative order number one, it totally destroys any hope for Vic Rodriguez, but also takes down anyone associated with that gambit, and that was the then press secretary. Because if you don't get rid of her, the inevitable question every media person will ask is, you announced that there was that document. Now the new AS says there's no such document.
That's right.
What's the score? You cannot answer that without either saying, that the new AS is a liar, or that you lied yourself. So you might as well just take yourself out of the game or be taken out. That's the particular circumstances there, as we understand it, looking from outside.
Yeah.
So,
So
it's essentially, to answer your question, there is the initial payback, and the moment the initial payback is made when you win, the question is of utility. I've already paid you back. It's sort of, consider it like what President Duterte did with the Marcoses in his time. The initial payback was the state funeral. Then they never really got more favors from him. And everyone is expecting there was going to be more. But it turns out that was about it. That as far as he was concerned, that's what he owed the Marcoses. So in this case, there's the initial round of favors. Those have all been paid. Quits na tayo. And then the utility and value of everyone else is really situational, depending on how the administration is doing, the issues about the president, and the president's political health, so to speak.
Yeah, very interesting. And maybe the unkindest cut of all for Vic Rodriguez was hearing the new executive secretary say, "We don't even talk about it." I mean, it's not even on the table. His position is not even on the table. I'm curious though, so I want to dig deeper into this idea that Trixie Angeles wagon was hitched to Vic Rodriguez's star. No? Because if you enter Duterte echo chambers, no? So I follow quite a few journalists who are pro Marcos, pro Duterte. You will see that they have been the Duterte supporters have been very critical of Vic Rodriguez, but are very supportive up to today of Trixie Angeles. Yeah. So they're saying we can't believe it. Why is this happening to her? She's good. So is it legitimate also to see that there is some division between the Marcoses and the Dutertes? Is the infighting there a reflection of the...
Don't forget that first of all, you have to make the distinction between the senior Duterte, as in former President Duterte, and the Vice President Duterte, because they have their own mini coalitions, or they themselves are components of the coalition, and not necessarily operating in tandem. Most clearly, you saw it in the former president's declaration that his party is now going to fiscalize the administration.
That's right.
So there's that, and you know that he was never keen on the union of the two to begin with. And then there is, of course, the particular dilemma of how to handle the vice president, who is a formidable political force on her own. The president has taken the tack of a full concession, to give her every impression of getting his support and respect. But again, this goes down the line to everyone else. Again, for every reporter you talk to, you'll hear that there is a difference between the way the former Duterte old guard that may still be in the government feel and are being treated, and those who are connected to and have hitched their star to the vice president. It's not necessarily two groups that even see eye to eye or even like each other. And then the president, for his part, and the people around the president are having to settle that. Plus the fourth element, which is another former president, which is former President Arroyo, who in many ways is the
broker,
the one who is not only the broker, but the one who is sort of the minder for the vice president, but who has her own issues with the current president. She was denied the speakership. She's had to bide her time. But you see, sometimes in some cases, there's now an effort by the president to try to be more accommodating and to be more outwardly, at least, respectful towards her for the sake of peace. So this is a four-cornered fight in many ways. A lot of it done behind the scenes, and a lot of it perhaps determined at home because of the, for the first time in 20 years, we have a first lady, and we have a first lady who is, not an ordinary first lady, in that she is herself the head of one of the biggest or most powerful law firms in the country.
Mhm. That's right. Um, I was curious. The name of Jojo Ochoa being floated as COA chair. What do you think about that?
That would come from the fact that when it was still most Marcos, Ochoa, etc., they had been law partners once upon a
That's
time.
right. Mhm.
They haven't been law partners for a long time, and my understanding, though I really don't know them very well, is that they haven't been particularly friendly since 2016.
Mhm.
Like any name, sometimes the best way to disguise who the real name being floated is just to throw other names that will serve as a distraction, and that's a very juicy item. It's also
Mhm.
quite plausible because he is, on his part, he's as competent a government functionary as any. The previous COA chair, Mike Aguinaldo, came from his office. So it's as good a name as any, I suppose, if you were looking at it that way.
Oh, I didn't know Mike Aguinaldo came from his office.
Yeah,
Very good
he
COA
was. He
chair.
was. Yeah, he was.
Yeah. Maybe just the last question. You spoke of a four-cornered fight, or a four-cornered coalition. Some people may have jumped prematurely to the conclusion that this Tuesday purge uh, was the president's attempt to contain the infighting, and it may not be enough. Might be too early. We haven't even reached day 100. But do you think that this four-cornered coalition will make it all the way to the end of 2022? I'm sorry, 2028?
Well, there's always the midterms. I always feel that every administration, I think, from the time it enters office, is its first problem is the midterms.
Mhm.
So that's what we have to see. There you see that there are some handicaps. We have an incomplete cabinet.
Mhm.
I don't think you have as solid control by the president's party as you might expect. Put another way, PDP Laban is a little stronger than you would expect a has
Mhm.
been former administration party to be by this time.
Mhm.
Um, the former president and former speaker is a big question mark of how she's going to play her cards, as
Mhm.
is the case of the vice president. How happy she is and how content she is with the things being placed. I think all this was a battle for rationalizing and fortifying the home base of the president.
Mhm.
That it's for an outsider, it's entirely possible that the most objective way to look at this is that Vic Rodriguez was not right to be executive secretary.
Mhm.
That whether a former chief justice is perhaps overripe is also a valid question.
Mhm.
And I think you're beginning to see how overripe he might be because
Mhm.
he's set in his ways. And, you know, everyone likes to think they're a comms expert. And when executive secretaries try to play comms, it's a double-edged game. So
That's right.
for every benefit, there's a cost. And we'll be seeing that. But now we know, for example, that there is a closing of the ranks. The palace is now probably going to be less leaky, more bulletproof, and perhaps even more efficient
Mhm.
than it has been. Whether that can compensate for the president's style of leadership or where he wants to take things is what we have to see.
Thank you very much to Manolo Quezon, true explainer who, among many other responsibilities, curates the Philippine Diary Project. Thank you for sharing your time, your experience, and your insights. Sa uulitin.
Sige, thank you.
That's it for us tonight. The next step for engaged citizens is always to take a more active part in rebuilding our democracy. See you in the public square. This is John Nery. Thank you and good night.